Think we're on. Okay, hi, morning everyone, or afternoon, wherever you may be. I'm going to bring on my friend Kevin Patel this morning. We've known each other for about a year or so, and I'm very excited to bring him on. Definitely go and follow him at I'm Kevin Patel. Just waiting for him to come up. So yeah, again, I'm interviewing Kevin Patel this morning, just different people are requesting to come on, but not Kevin. There we go. Come on. Here we go.
Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. Just
Good,
an
good.
early morning, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I thought to do it early in the morning just in case there are people who are already in the afternoon, but I'll also save it, of course, for everyone. But thanks
Definitely.
for coming on, Kevin. It's lovely to
Thank you for having
speak to you
me.
again. We've obviously had so many great dialogues on different platforms. Recently, we did a good thing with Rainforest Alliance, and we spoke about kind of hope within activism with yourself and other activists, Vanessa Nakate. So thanks for coming on.
Yeah,
I'd love for you just to introduce yourself, maybe say kind of where you are in the world and sort of who you are, basically.
definitely. My name is Kevin J. Patel. I'm a 19-year-old. I'm 19 years of age. I'm an intersectional climate justice activist. I'm living in Los Angeles, specifically South Central Los Angeles. And I'll be starting my second year of college, hopefully at LMU.
Great. Yeah, so Kevin and I met, we were doing, I guess, a sustainability course that you came into at UCLA. We met
Yeah,
there, and it's been lovely to see you kind of at different actions, whether that's kind of climate strikes marches we've been to. I introduced you at Jane Fonda's Fire Drill Fridays with Greenpeace,
yeah.
which was a really great and interesting event, how she's kind of staged those. I think it was really nice to introduce you, but to really, allow you and give you the platform to speak.
Hmm.
I'd love to hear a bit about, I know you started OneUp Action,
Definitely.
which is your own platform. And I guess I'd just love to hear like what brought you into the climate space and kind of what is there a particular focus you have, I guess, or campaign?
Well, definitely. I guess I'll start with, how I got started. I really, I was, I got started at a very young age, at the age of 12, during my middle school years because, I was diagnosed with heart palpitations and irregular heartbeat. I talk about that a lot and how specifically in South LA and around the world, air pollution and smog pollution is so rampant in a lot of cities, and specifically for LA, air and smog pollution was rampant. And as a young, healthy person, I didn't know how I got heart palpitations or irregular heartbeat, and all of a sudden it just happened. And to my surprise, I was looking into the environmental impacts that Los Angeles was facing, and I found out that air and smog pollution was such a huge thing. And that for me, just noticing that and seeing that kind of made me want to take up the mantle and say, enough is enough. My community is being affected. We're not only getting heart palpitations and irregular heartbeats, but we're also getting asthma. We're getting all these underlying health issues. Um, yeah, so that's basically, I started during my middle school years, but that's how I kind of led into climate justice
Mhm.
throughout my middle school and my high school years. But before my middle school years, actually, I was teaching students about food inequalities and, yeah, just food inequalities and how we live in a food desert and how and where food comes from.
Yeah, and I think understanding all these terms and how kind of disproportionately communities are affected, as you say, a food desert in South LA, meaning that lack of access to sort of
Hmm.
whole foods, healthy foods, like actual things rather than only processed things, liquor stores, things that don't kind of nutritionally feed us, which obviously can also then feed into health issues, like you're saying, with respiratory issues
Hmm.
and cancers that can develop due to the closeness to either just general city pollution, as you're saying, that LA is
Yeah.
obviously has a lot of because of cars and things like that, but also there's so many, drilling sites and facilities here that, you know, I feel like I've always like driven past those things and seen those things and never really known, I guess, the direct negative effect they can have on health. I guess I didn't
Definitely.
grow like in my city of London where I grew up. I didn't really see facilities like that. And recently I feel like that's been really brought to light with is it AB 345, which is a
Yeah.
bill that's trying to pass to make sure that there's a certain distance between communities that are often communities of color and these drilling sites.
And I could talk about that if you want a
Yeah, it'd
little
be really
bit.
interesting to.
Yeah, I have some notes on that actually. So like AB 345 is so important because more than 250,000 people in the city of Los Angeles right now live within 2,500 feet of an active oil and gas well. And that is just of the 1.8 million people from all over California that are living near an oil drilling and are burdened with pollution. That being 92% of them being BIPOC communities, so Black, Indigenous, people of color. And, you know, so this summer, California lawmakers will consider AB 345, a bill that requires the state to create a health and safety buffer zone and consider a minimum of 2,500 feet between hazardous oil and gas extraction wells, as well as sensitive areas like our homes, our schools, our playgrounds, and our hospitals. And if lawmakers if lawmakers are serious about keeping all of us safe and keeping and you know and addressing the systematic injustices and putting us on the right path towards a more just and livable future, and are you know they must vote yes on AB 345. So I'm asking for every every Californian that's watching, put pressure on our lawmakers to pass AB 345. It is so important. It's an important policy that is going to make a huge difference to a lot of communities around California.
Yeah, I think right now the NRDC, if you go to their site, they have a number that you can text to find out the direct
Hmm.
phone call to your senator to then call and express your kind of opinion of supporting that bill. I think as well what's
Definitely.
so interesting about that is this constantly, I think, with activism and taking to the streets and social
Hmm.
media, you know, we have all these layers of change making. But I think what's so important about this is how policy at the end of the day, like, really needs to protect people and the planet. And there's so much that often we can still be kind of powerless within until policies put in place. And not only is it put in place, but like also made sure that it's kept to. And do you
Hmm.
find, I mean, when you're, I guess your general kind of like attitude, hopefulness, kind of way in which you look at your campaigns and what you work in, how do you strike a balance, I think, between, I guess, individual community action and corporate government kind of responsibility? I feel for me personally, it's this constant push and pull where you can get so angry that like, why do the people have to do some of these things where we should have a democracy that works or we should have corporations that care about us?
Definitely. And I guess like one of the biggest things that I would say is that, like activism for me is a survival tool, right? Like my community is being affected by the climate crisis right now. We're seeing air pollution, smog pollution in the fossil fuel industry, literally, impacting BIPOC communities, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, marginalized communities, low income communities. So it's our communities that are being impacted the most by this, right? And so I think one of the things that strikes me the most is like just being able to work for my community and the small achievements that we are able to achieve, right? And that being for me one of the highlights in climate change that I was able to very much get past here in LA County was the Youth Climate Commission, which is by far one of
Mm-hmm.
the biggest achievements because it's the first ever in the world. It's never been done before, but this is the Youth Climate Commission is giving a young people a seat at the decision making table, right? Young people are very much engaged in and enthusiastic about politics more than ever before, right? But we still don't have lots of power in making those key decisions on our behalf and on our communities, on our neighborhoods and the places that we live in. So I think the Youth Climate Commission just does that, is give us the power to make change, become the change makers. And
Mm-hmm.
that in itself is, a form of how I look at it, being, in climate activism, a lot of the stuff that we're hearing is, so many bad things, right? We're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction. We're, doing so many things that are leading to, towards a, bad future for us because we're deforesting all of our rainforests, and there's just so much bad news out there. And I just try to look at the positive, right? Instead of being pessimistic about our future, let's be optimistic as well, as like we can still fix it. We're able able to take action and really make a difference. And I think the young people of our generation, like my generation, are going to be able to do it. And that is how I've been able to really stay focused and, about what campaigns I do and the things that I'm fighting for my community.
For
But yeah,
sure. I mean, I think your hope, I mean, you give me so much hope, you yourself, Kevin, and your generation. I think it's like,
thank
I'm like
you.
patiently waiting until you all get, I mean, you're already in positions of power. You really are. But I
Hmm.
think like, I'm so like patiently waiting for that moment where, we shift through and we kind of get rid of this kind of back end of space we're in, I think,
Hmm.
right now in politics and in corporate kind of power. And I think, yeah, I think it's interesting that, like you're saying, you have this position to actually be on this youth. What's it? Sorry, can you just say the name of it again? It's a
So youth climate
youth
commission.
climate
Yeah.
commission. Yeah, and I think and that's just within LA or California.
No, so it's within LA County, all 88
Okay,
cities. It got passed, but it hasn't been established. Like it hasn't, the council hasn't formed yet.
begun kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in the process of like establishing, process of people applying to it. But we definitely got it passed, and it's the first ever in the world. And that for my, like, that for me is an achievement in itself, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think I think what's so interesting right now is so many systems are being questioned and broken down,
Mm-hmm.
and sort of veils have been lifted on the kind of disproportionate kind of uh, power that people have been given and voices that they've been, passing the mic and making sure that the right people are able to sit around those tables of decision making, because they can come, as you have come, from direct personal experience of the effects of
Mm-hmm.
the climate crisis. And I think, it's going to affect everyone. It's just obviously affecting people disproportionately right now and much earlier than others. And I think always, the more you begin to know or hear of people firsthand that experience that, that's what I love storytelling and conversations like this, is because hopefully the people can listen or hear, and that's why I love, I
Definitely.
think, social media, because you can, not only can you see the other, but you can see yourself in that person,
Definitely.
and the humanity kind of in that. Do you think, I mean, can you tell us a little bit about OneUp Action, and I guess how people can get involved in what you're doing, or if there's any specific campaigns or things that are like keeping you active right now?
Definitely. I do have quite a lot. So yeah, so I actually founded OneUp Action last year in September 23rd. Ironically, that was my birthday, but it was also the UN week in New York City. I was actually in New York during the time, during my birthday. But with, I started OneUp Action with the intention of fighting the climate crisis, but also a response of how Black, Indigenous people of color, marginalized communities, and low-income youth generally not having the opportunity or the resources to, or funding even, to take direct action, right? Or even having the resources to be supporting their communities and taking these actions, so that is what I wanted to do, is making sure that we can become the change makers in our communities, and having the resources and support for, doing actions such as planting trees or getting into science and tech or anything like that. Definitely just wanting to do that is something that is so important. UA's mission is to help young people, with the resources to take action and have the support. And we have a lot of youth-led organizations that are working on systematic actions, which is very important, right? We really, really need that, right? Strikes, marches, rallies. But we also really need support for our communities, being the BIPOC communities, being the marginalized youth that need access to resources to take actions. And I think I first got into I first got into this movement, when I first got into this movement, it was very hard for me to find resources to even take actions. And I think that's for everyone, right? A lot of
Mhm.
young people around the world, not just in the United States, find it hard, especially if you're coming from a, a background of being Black, Indigenous people of color or marginalized or even low income. You kind of find it hard to even get involved with climate action or climate activism. And I think that for me was the tipping point. And I really wanted to say, like, let's make climate accessible. Let's make sure that young people have the resources so they're able to take actions and they're able to get involved with these opportunities. Because, of course, a lot of the people that are associated with climate activism come from low income, marginalized BIPOC communities. And we're at the forefront of the climate crisis. When I was in, 8 years ago when I first started, there weren't people that looked like me, darker skin, toned people in the climate movement. And that's the reason why I really wanted to, make sure that we're able to offer resources to, just BIPOC communities, low income communities, so they're able to take actions, right? We're not
Yeah,
coming
making
from,
sure they see, someone will see you and be more inspired to know they have a voice in this dialogue because they may see themselves in you. And I think that's so much with culture, until you see the person that is you reflected back at you, you're not necessarily,
definitely.
you don't see the space for you to step into. Or
Definitely. And there's this whole conversation about intersectionality within the movement. That's so important, right?
Mhm.
Last November I called out the movement and saying, like, we're an intergenerational movement, right? There's all people from all backgrounds, different ages in the movement, but we really are lacking in intersectionality. And and I'm glad that Leah started her, intersectional environmentalist, because that is such an important thing. Right when that took off, I was kind of crying because I was like, that is exactly what I needed, right?
Yeah.
This is what we need in the movement. We really need to make sure that we're intersectional, but we're also intergenerational, because this is not just young people fighting for their futures. This is also older generations that are going to have to realize that they themselves have caused this
Mhm.
issue, right? Or they played a part in it. And yeah, I think that in itself is like what everyone is fighting for. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's that difficult, that moment where you're angry, you understand the situation, you feel the injustice of it, but then you're like, and now what? And often it can be so overwhelming, you're like paralyzed to do anything, so you're kind of just like, I guess nothing I do will make any difference, I'm just gonna be quietly bitter and upset about it. Or you can
Hmm.
do what I think you have done, so many people are doing, is like, okay, how can I just put my foot in the door and find that, like, space community that I can begin in. And I think for anyone, tuning in, there's definitely something you can find. I think, we're very fortunate that we have the internet, we have social media, be that
Yeah.
not physical space of being in a local community somewhere. I do think there is someone out there who wants to be your, like, partner in crime around this. And I think you will find that togetherness. And I found, when you suddenly feel really overwhelmed, is just reaching out to that person, going on a strike, taking an action, making a call, just to
Hmm.
make it, like, feel tangible. And I obviously think with OneUp Action, it is those tangible things, even if it's
Hmm.
something like really tangible, like planting a tree, or much more kind of specific and finding like a policy within your, or a petition within your community that you want to begin, even not only just sign, but like you can start your own kind of petitions and issues.
In campaigns and stuff like that. I also think
Yeah.
that OneUp Action is so unique is because we want young people to become the next change makers. We have this program launching in September, but we really want, young people to have the resources, right? Like low income, marginalized BIPOC communities don't really have the resources that affluent communities people have. Like we are not able to work for JPL or NASA or go to the Google Science Fair, right? So these
Mhm.
type of opportunities are very inaccessible for our communities. And I think that in itself is making sure that accessibility within the climate movement and making sure
Mhm.
opportunities are getting to our communities, right? And so they're
Yeah.
able to excel and making sure that they're able to, come up with the next solution to fix a certain issue within the climate crisis. That is what I want to do, is making sure that we're helping the next change makers, not even the next change makers. I also always say this is that young people are not the leaders of tomorrow. We're the leaders of today, right? We're doing the work right now. We're the youth advocates, we're the
Mhm.
young activists, the organizers that are doing the work right now in our communities around the world, and just interacting with people. And I think that in itself is like, the world needs to change. As you said, Bonnie, we have seen that the current systems have exposed a lot of the things that don't work for us, right? The fossil fuel industry literally suffered during the beginning of the pandemic. And I think that in itself shows that we are no longer reliant on fossil fuels. Well, it also showed a side of the injustices that are happening to our Black community members, as well as, not just in the United States, but around the world, and that in itself we have to address. It's like these systems that are in place right now are no longer working for people that are being affected by the climate crisis, and it's only perpetrating the climate crisis even more, and the systems of oppression as well. So I think that in itself is like, we need to start addressing these issues right away, because it's only impacting people of color, marginalized communities, and low-income communities.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. And I think during this time, obviously all these supply chains, whether that was food at the beginning when people kind of like grabbing like food to survive or worried about surviving, and all these things begin to crumble, whether it's supply chains, whether it's systems of injustice, oppression. And I think often we're told this story that like there isn't enough and there's a scarcity, which right now there is, but I think also there is an abundance if it was properly and fairly shared, which is not the case, right? The disproportionate sharing of wealth and product and supply. Whereas I think that's what's interesting about seeing things through the lens of hope, is that you're excited by the solutions rather than terrified by the kind of the lack of, or the things that don't work. And I think it's been an interesting time. I found personally during this time, like things that haven't worked or things I've had to let go of that just couldn't work because of staying at home, not traveling, not reimagining things, redesigning things. I think it just shows that we can like build all these systems back as we rebuild things like better. And it's kind of an interesting, like, I never thought we'd be here, like being able to actually genuinely discuss the idea of like, how does community rebuild back? How do we interact with one another or go and consume things? Because at the end of the day, like how we spend our money is often how we vote too, with the way we want the planet to be treated. But
definitely.
I just think, I don't know, it's a very, very exciting and interesting time. And as you were saying, with the platform that Leah started, Intersectional Environmentalists, I think not only I think the ability and disabilities of people and the reality of not everyone can show up and be the like person at the climate strike march, that's not the only cookie cutter model of an activist. I think there's so many different versions.
There's so many different facets, right? There's like,
sure.
I think everyone can do anything to take action. And I think right now what we need is, a lot of it, right? We need government officials to make sure that we're continuing to do action, right? But we also need to make sure that we're doing our individual steps, and whether that be cleaning a beach, doing individual action, coming up with the next solutions or ideas or projects that are going to solve the climate crisis. That is what we need to do right now. And talk to our politicians, say, hey, if we're able to walk the walk and talk the talk, why aren't you able to walk the walk and talk the talk, right? That is the same argument that we have to use, is that a lot of our politicians want to give us false hope and just all these false promises saying that they're going to take action against the climate crisis, but they really don't. And it's just talking the talk, but not actually walking the walk. And so we really need to start talking the talk and walking the walk. And if we ourselves were to do it and show our politicians, say, hey, if we're able to do it, like if we're able to take actions, why aren't you able to take actions, right? Like, why aren't you able to, pass
and
the Green New Deal?
They can scale like very quickly, solutions that are working but need to be put at scale in a fast-tracked way. I think, I think also I feel like, I'm just that last definite generation that when I was younger, I definitely was not, I was active as you in a way, but not really in terms of like really understanding the politicians that were speaking for me. And I think for so long, we've unfortunately let that slip, and people have come in that just really don't represent how we want our planet to be treated. So it's an exciting time. It's an interesting time. I'd love to just leave on a bit of a note of, I guess we've been talking about hope. I think you like allude so much hope. But I think is there a specific action that people could take maybe in relationship to what you're doing?
Yeah,
And
definitely.
yeah, is there a little slice of something we can leave everyone with?
Yeah, so I have multiple actions, but I will just read off them. These are follow pages. So like I'm going to say follow OneUp Action as we have many chapters, but follow our main account at OneUp Action. Um, we are working to get resources to young people to take climate action, especially BIPOC, marginalized youth, and low-income youth. Also, just if you're interested in doing direct actions within your community, we definitely are having some resources coming soon. So that is a place that you can plug in to get resources. Follow California Youth versus Big Oil. We're doing amazing things there where we're fighting for against, not only combating the climate crisis, but also fighting against the fossil fuel industry and against Gavin Newsom. And lastly, follow Intersectional Environmentalist. We are doing some incredible work right there at working on intersectionality within the movement and just making sure that we bring in more diverse voices, but we're not only protecting the world, we're also protecting the planet and its people.
It is fabulous. I'll try and also link those. Text me them, and I'll link them to
I definitely will.
the page. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, obviously, it's lovely to be speaking to you again, even if it's virtual. It's been really
Definitely.
lovely to stand alongside you and just cultivate a friendship with you and just hear more about your experience and story and kind of know that we're sort of stronger together in this. So it's been lovely. And thanks
Thank
for
you so
being here
much
as
for
well.
inviting me here to speak to you. And definitely, we haven't seen each other for quite a long time
I
because of
know, yeah.
COVID-19, but
Hopefully soon.
hope you're keeping safe. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for inviting me. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, for watching.
Yeah.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.